The unofficial time of death for condemned inmate Stanley Williams is 12:35 p.m. We will have an official time of death when the warden arrives to give a brief statement.
December 13th, 2005, San Quentin State Prison. Just after midnight, technicians struggled to begin the execution of Stanley Tookie Williams, the Crips co-founder, whose case drew national attention. For over 20 years, his attorneys fought to stop this moment. Yet as he lay on the gurney, one truth was undeniable. His legal team couldn't save him. Here are 5 cases when lawyers failed to save brutal gang members.
Minutes ago, a federal jury here in the Eastern District convicted Joaquín El Chapo Guzmán on all counts of the federal indictment.
February 12th, 2019, Brooklyn, New York. The courtroom was tense, the jury solemn. Joaquín El Chapo Guzmán, once the untouchable kingpin of the Sinaloa cartel, sat awaiting his fate. After a 3-month trial, 50 witnesses and mountains of evidence, the verdict was finally in. But what happened next would reveal the limits of even the best legal defense, the overwhelming power of justice, and the true cost of a lifetime of crime. Joaquín El Chapo Guzmán wasn't just any defendant, he was the most notorious drug lord of our time. The charges against him were staggering: a continuing criminal enterprise, drug trafficking, money laundering, and countless acts of violence. The evidence was overwhelming. Testimony from 14 former associates, intercepted communications, and a quarter-century of drug shipments traced back to him. His conviction seemed inevitable, but his lawyers fought every step of the way. Guzmán's legal team, led by Jeffrey Lichtman and Eduardo Balarezo, faced unprecedented challenges. The trial was conducted under extraordinary security. Jurors remained anonymous, witnesses' identities were protected, and Guzmán himself was held in near-total isolation. The prosecution's case was so strong that the defense strategy shifted from denying his involvement to merely challenging his leadership role in the cartel. Despite mounting evidence, Guzmán's lawyers fought every angle. Their defense claimed he was merely a lieutenant, not the kingpin portrayed by prosecutors. They argued that the true cartel leaders had paid off officials and supplied witnesses against Guzmán. But as the trial progressed, it became clear that the weight of evidence was too great to overcome. The verdict was swift and decisive: guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced Guzmán to life plus 30 years and ordered him to forfeit $12.6 billion. It was a staggering defeat, but the legal battle was far from over. Guzmán's lawyers immediately launched an appeal, focusing on alleged juror misconduct and claims that the government had suppressed exculpatory evidence. As Guzmán began his life sentence at ADX Florence, the Alcatraz of the Rockies, his legal team continued to file appeals and motions. They challenged the harsh conditions of his confinement, arguing that 23-hour isolation and constant surveillance were unconstitutional. But the courts repeatedly sided with the government, citing his history of dramatic prison escapes and the ongoing threat he posed.
In a 24-page letter to the judge, they argued that the current terms of El Chapo's confinement are excessive and damaging his health. They say it's ultimately unconstitutional.
Even as his appeals failed, Guzmán's lawyers maintained their professional duty. They continued to file motions not because of who he was, but because of what he represented.
Bury Joaquín Guzmán under tons of steel in Colorado and make him disappear, but you're never going to remove the stink from this verdict due to the failure to order a hearing on the misconduct of the jury in this case.
Ultimately, Joaquín El Chapo Guzmán's case became a testament to the limits of legal defense against overwhelming evidence. But in the end, the justice system prevailed, not just through the weight of evidence, but through the persistence of due process, the professionalism of defense attorneys, and the unwavering commitment to the rule of law. His lawyers pushed back at every turn, but the verdict stayed the same. In the next case, another gang figure faced a similar reality, this time on death row.
One of the last men to be executed in California was the notorious leader of the Crips gang, Stanley Tookie Williams, in 2005.
December 13th, 2005. Just after midnight, the state of California executed Stanley Tookie Williams, co-founder of the Crips gang, convicted in 1981 for 4 brutal murders during 2 robberies. Williams' death marked the end of a remarkable legal saga and the tragic failure of the justice system to save a man who many believed had changed. Williams' crimes were as senseless as they were violent. The first, on February 28, 1979, involved the cold-blooded murder of 24-year-old Albert Lewis Owens, a convenience store clerk in Whittier. Williams, along with accomplices, forced Owens into a back room, told him to get on his knees, and shot him twice in the back with a shotgun. 12 days later, Williams and another man broke into the Brookhaven Motel in South Central Los Angeles, murdering 67-year-old Sai Sha Young, his 63-year-old wife Yen Ai Yang, and their 43-year-old daughter Ye Chen Lin for a mere $50. The violence shocked even a city used to gang brutality. Williams' trial was swift and decisive. Multiple eyewitnesses, forensic evidence, and his own boasting about the murders led to 4 counts of first-degree murder with special circumstances. The jury convicted him on all counts and recommended the death penalty, a sentence affirmed through a long series of appeals that would span more than 2 decades. From the beginning, Williams maintained his innocence, claiming he was framed because of his gang leadership. His attorneys launched a multi-pronged attack on the verdict, raising claims of prosecutorial misconduct, exclusion of exculpatory evidence, ineffective counsel, racial bias in jury selection, and improper use of jailhouse informants. But court after court found the evidence overwhelming. The prosecution's case was particularly strong because, unlike many death penalty cases, the physical evidence matched the testimony. The shotgun shells found at the murder scenes matched Williams's weapon, to the exclusion of all other firearms, according to ballistic experts. Multiple witnesses testified that Williams had boasted about the murders, and his accomplices' stories corroborated each other. The courts repeatedly found that any alleged irregularities in the trial were immaterial to the overwhelming evidence of guilt. One of Williams' primary defense arguments involved alleged racial bias in jury selection. His lawyers claimed the prosecution excluded all black jurors. The district attorney countered with proof that one of the jurors, William James McClurkin, was black, though the defense argued he did not appear black. The courts found no merit in this claim. Williams also attacked the credibility of jailhouse informants, claiming they fabricated testimony in exchange for leniency. But the courts noted that multiple witnesses, some of whom received no benefit, consistently implicated Williams. In 2002, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals systematically dismantled each of Williams's claims, affirming both the conviction and death sentence. While his legal appeals failed, Williams launched an extraordinary public campaign for clemency. From death row, he wrote a series of children's books warning against gang life, a move that earned him multiple Nobel Prize nominations and support from Hollywood celebrities, politicians, and activists. This campaign, however, became a double-edged sword. While it demonstrated Williams' apparent transformation, it also raised questions about the sincerity of his contrition. Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger, in denying clemency, wrote,
"Is Williams's redemption complete and sincere, or is it just a hollow promise? Without an apology and atonement for these senseless and brutal killings, there can be no redemption."
Williams' steadfast refusal to admit guilt ultimately undermined his claim of rehabilitation in the eyes of the state. As his execution date approached, Williams' legal team made a final desperate push. They filed last-minute appeals, including a 150-page habeas corpus petition and requests for a stay of execution, all of which were denied. Even a personal appeal to Governor Schwarzenegger failed. On December 12, 2005, Schwarzenegger issued his final decision.
"The possible irregularities in Williams's trial have been thoroughly and carefully reviewed by the courts, and there is no reason to disturb the judicial decisions that uphold the jury's decisions that he is guilty of these 4 murders and should pay with his life."
The morning of his execution, Williams declined a last meal and instead drank milk. He refused to allow his family or friends to witness what he called a sick and perverted spectacle. He spent his final hours writing letters and praying with spiritual advisors. At 12:01 a.m. on December 13th, Williams was led into the execution chamber at San Quentin Prison. The process was not smooth. Witnesses described how technicians struggled to find a vein for the lethal injection, prolonging the procedure and causing visible distress to Williams. At one point, he asked the technician,
Are you doing that right?
The entire process took 36 minutes, an unusually long and difficult execution.
He looked exasperated at the length of the process of doing this.
Media witnesses described the emotional impact on the victims' families, including weeping and an unwavering stare from Albert Owen's stepmother. The chamber, described as archaic and medieval, became the final stage in a 2-decade legal drama. Reactions to his executions are divided. Some said,
"Thou shalt not kill." I don't care if you're the governor, president, me, you, thou shalt not kill. Now, if dude killed somebody, let God deal with it. That's not my call. That's not your call. Anybody else's call. Just that simple.
While some others agreed it's a deserved death.
Well, I mean, you live by the sword, you die by the sword. You kill someone, you're going to punish for it. So.
I felt that he should have died because he killed other people.
Williams was the 12th person executed in California since the death penalty was reinstated in 1977. His execution sparked debate about capital punishment, redemption, and the role of celebrity activism in justice. While some saw his death as justice for 4 innocent victims, others saw it as the state's failure to recognize genuine rehabilitation. His funeral became a powerful statement about redemption, race, and justice in America. In the end, Stanley "Tookie" Williams became both a cautionary tale and a symbol of lost potential. His execution closed one of the most complex and controversial chapters in California's criminal justice history, a case where the law prevailed, but perhaps justice in its broader sense remained unfinished. His legal team fought for a second chance, but the courts held firm. Next is the case about another man whose influence couldn't save him when the law closed in. October 17, 1931, Alphonse Gabriel Capone, known as Al Capone, was sentenced to 11 years in prison for tax evasion. He was found guilty by a jury after a lengthy investigation by the Treasury Department into his vast profits. While Capone dodged countless murder and bootlegging charges, it was the meticulous work of government accountants and some clever lawyering that finally landed him behind bars, despite the best efforts of his high-priced legal team. Just his name alone conjures images of Roaring '20s Chicago, speakeasies, gunfire in the streets, and lavish parties funded by crime. But for all the violence and mayhem this notorious gangster unleashed, his downfall came most unexpectedly, through the very system he thought he could outsmart. By the late 1920s, Capone had built a criminal empire that raked in over $100 million a year from illegal alcohol, gambling, and prostitution. He controlled politicians, police, and even judges across Chicago. For years, attempts to prosecute him for murder, extortion, or racketeering failed spectacularly. Witnesses disappeared, juries were bought, and evidence mysteriously vanished. So federal authorities decided to try a different approach. Instead of focusing on his violent crimes, they targeted his wallet. Thanks to a recent Supreme Court ruling, even illegally earned income was subject to federal tax, and Capone had never filed a tax return in his life. The government assigned its most relentless investigator, Frank Wilson, to the case. Wilson's team pored over department store receipts, hotel bills, jewelry purchases, and car registrations. They tracked down telephone bills totaling $39,000 and evidence of lavish parties Capone threw. While Capone never kept bank accounts or signed checks, his extravagant lifestyle was impossible to hide completely. But finding direct evidence of income was tough. Capone's criminal operations ran on fear and silence. Potential witnesses were either hostile to the government or too terrified to testify. Still, Wilson pressed on, gradually building a web of circumstantial evidence. The breakthrough came when investigators found ledgers from a 1926 raid on one of Capone's gambling halls. The books detailed profits from games like craps and roulette, with payments divided among Town, Ralph, Pete, and A, almost certainly referring to Capone and his associates. Handwriting analysis led them to Leslie Shumway, a gambling hall cashier who eventually agreed to testify, provided the government hid him safely until trial. Another key witness was Fred Rice, who admitted that a series of large cashier's checks represented Capone's net profits from a Cicero gambling hall. After 4 days in a cockroach-infested jail cell, Rice decided cooperating with the government was safer than facing Capone's vengeance. With the evidence mounting, Capone's tax attorney, Lawrence Mattingly, tried to negotiate a settlement with the government. In September 1930, Mattingly handed over a letter conceding taxable income for 6 years, from $26,000 in 1924 to $100,000 in 1928 and 1929. The letter would become one of the most contentious pieces of evidence at trial. Finally, on March 13, 1931, just 2 days before the statute of limitations expired, a grand jury indicted Capone for tax evasion in 1924. 2 months later, they added charges for the years 1925 through 1929. Capone's lawyers scrambled to strike a deal. They offered a guilty plea in exchange for a 2.5-year sentence. But Judge James H. Wilkerson wasn't having it. In a stunning move, he rejected the plea bargain, declaring,
"It is time for somebody to impress upon the defendant that it is utterly impossible to bargain with a federal court."
As the trial approached, Capone's organization began its usual jury tampering tactics, bribing, threatening, and buying off potential jurors. But Judge Wilkerson had a trick up his sleeve. On the morning of jury selection, he ordered the entire panel swapped with another judge's case, blindsiding Capone's team and ensuring an impartial jury. The government's case was overwhelming. Witnesses testified to Capone's lavish spending and his control over illegal gambling operations. The ledger books, Shumway's testimony, and the infamous Mattingly letter laid out a clear pattern of unreported income. Capone's defense team was left grasping at straws. They claimed he lost hundreds of thousands of dollars betting on horse races, trying to offset his illegal income with equally illegal losses. But gambling losses can only be deducted from gambling winnings, so the argument fell flat. In closing arguments, defense attorney Albert Fink painted Capone as a generous man targeted by an oppressive government. But the jury wasn't buying it. After 8 hours of deliberation, they found Capone guilty on multiple counts of tax evasion. Judge Wilkerson handed down an 11-year sentence, the harshest ever for tax evasion at that time. Capone's lawyers filed appeal after appeal, even bringing in top tax law experts. They argued that some charges were beyond the statute of limitations, but the courts weren't sympathetic. Capone's time had finally run out. He began his sentence at the Atlanta Federal Penitentiary, where he tried to maintain control over his criminal empire. But when officials caught wind of his special treatment, they transferred him to the newly opened Alcatraz. There, he was just inmate number 85, stripped of his power and influence. Capone's health rapidly declined in prison. Untreated syphilis ravaged his mind and body. He became confused, disoriented, and eventually mentally unfit. After serving 7.5 years, he was released to a mental hospital in 1939, barely able to function. The once mighty crime boss spent his final years in Florida, cared for by his family as his mind deteriorated to that of a 12-year-old. He died in 1947, a shadow of his former self. In the end, it wasn't bullets or rivals that brought down Al Capone. It was the persistence of government accountants, the integrity of a federal judge, and the failure of his high-powered legal team to save him from a simple tax charge. Capone's story stands as a testament to the power of the law and a warning that even the most untouchable criminal empire can fall when the right people refuse to be intimidated. In the next case, another powerful figure would soon learn that no reputation is strong enough to outrun justice.
Country's #1 fugitive, the most powerful drug trafficker Mexico had ever seen, was taken into custody without a single shot being fired.
April 8, 1989, Mexican law enforcement agents surrounded a modest home in Guadalajara. Inside, Miguel Ángel Félix Gallardo, known as El Padrino, was preparing for the day, unaware that his empire was about to fall. When arrested, Félix Gallardo tried to bribe the officers with $5 million for his freedom. They refused, marking a pivotal moment in the history of Mexico's drug trade and its relationship with the law. Félix Gallardo's story begins in Sinaloa, where he was born in 1946 into a farming family. He rose from humble beginnings to become a federal judicial police agent. Early on, he served as a bodyguard for Governor Leopoldo Sánchez Celis, a powerful political figure who became his mentor. This relationship opened doors to connections that would later protect his vast criminal enterprise. By the late 1970s, Félix Gallardo had consolidated various drug trafficking operations into the Guadalajara cartel. This organization controlled nearly all drug trafficking routes into the United States, leveraging strategic partnerships with Colombian cartels and local Mexican organizations. His business acumen and political connections allowed the cartel to operate with near impunity for years. The turning point came in 1985 with the brutal torture and murder of DEA agent Enrique "Kiki" Camarena. This act galvanized U.S. and Mexican authorities, launching an intensive investigation known as Operation Leyenda. Despite mounting evidence and growing pressure, Félix Gallardo remained protected by his political allies, managing to evade capture for years. His arrest in 1989 was a carefully orchestrated operation involving only a select group of trustworthy officials. The news shocked the criminal world and exposed deep corruption in Mexico's political and law enforcement systems. Almost immediately, over 90 police officers deserted, and several high-ranking officials were arrested for their connections to the cartel. Félix Gallardo's legal team faced overwhelming evidence. He was charged with racketeering, drug trafficking, and orchestrating the murder of a federal agent. Despite his resources and connections, the case against him was airtight. The prosecution's evidence included financial records, testimony from former associates, and proof of political corruption that shielded his operations. Even while incarcerated, Félix Gallardo attempted to maintain control over his empire. He continued to direct cartel operations via mobile phone until he was transferred to a high-security prison. Recognizing the threat of dismantling the entire organization at once, he instructed his lawyer to convene Mexico's top drug traffickers. At this 1989 meeting in Acapulco, he divided the drug corridors among various factions, leading to the creation of the Tijuana, Juarez, and Sinaloa cartels. Despite multiple appeals and legal maneuvers, Félix Gallardo's fate was sealed. In 2017, after serving 28 years, a retrial added another 37 years to his sentence. All attempts to secure house arrest due to declining health were denied by the courts, which found insufficient evidence that his medical condition warranted release. He was later released after serving 33 years and put on house arrest in September 2022. This decision was supported by Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador, who stated,
"I do not want anyone to suffer. I do not want anyone to be in jail."
His conviction marked a turning point in Mexico's approach to organized crime. The fall of Félix Gallardo exposed the deep roots of corruption and the complex relationships between drug traffickers, politicians, and law enforcement. It also signaled the beginning of a new era of violence, as the once unified cartel network splintered into rival factions, competing for territory and power. Despite his attempts to distance himself from the Camarena murder, claiming his confession was coerced, the evidence remained overwhelming. His lawyer's efforts to challenge witness credibility and procedural issues failed to sway the courts. The extensive documentation of his criminal enterprise and its political protection formed an insurmountable case. His conviction remains a milestone in the fight against organized crime, demonstrating both the complexity of these cases and the possibility of holding even the most powerful figures accountable. As the first true godfather of Mexico's modern drug trade, Félix Gallardo's legacy is one of both criminal innovation and eventual justice. His rise and fall illustrate the intricate web of power, corruption, and violence that defines the world of organized crime, and the persistent efforts required to combat it. Gallardo's legal team pushed back against every accusation, but the evidence from his own organization proved stronger than any defense. His sentence confirmed that power alone could not change the outcome, and in the next case, another man would learn this lesson in yet another courtroom battle.
This morning, Miguel and Gilberto Rodríguez Orejuela, brothers who ran the infamous Cali drug cartel in Colombia for more than 20 years, pleaded guilty in a federal court in Miami to a charge of a conspiracy to import cocaine in the United States.
June 9, 1995, Colombian police raided his Cali mansion. Gilberto Rodríguez Orejuela, the chessman, vanished into a hidden compartment. But even trapped, his mind raced, calculating moves across a global empire of cocaine, corruption, and influence that no cell could contain. But even his sharpest lawyers couldn't save him. His empire of cocaine and corruption was starting to unravel. They called him El Ajedrecista, the chess player. Not for nothing. Gilberto Rodríguez Orejuela moved pieces across the global drug board like a grandmaster. But this wasn't about checkered squares. His game was cocaine. Hundreds of tons of it, sent from Colombia to every corner of the world. And for a time, he was untouchable. Rodríguez Orejuela rose from humble beginnings in Mariquita, Colombia. Born in January 1939, the son of a painter and a homemaker. Dropping out of school at 15, he started as a pharmacy clerk, eventually owning his own store. But while drugs were always part of his business, they soon took on a different meaning. By the 1970s, he and his younger brother Miguel had built the Cali cartel, a criminal empire that, at its peak, controlled 80% of the U.S. cocaine market and 90% of Europe's. Rodríguez Orejuela was the strategic mind, the visionary. His brother ran day-to-day operations. Unlike their rivals, the brutal Medellin cartel, the Cali organization kept a lower profile. Rodríguez Orejuela focused on corruption and influence, paying off politicians, journalists, and law enforcement rather than waging open war. But when the U.S. and Colombian authorities finally came for the Cali cartel, the chessman found even his best defenses couldn't protect him forever. It started to unravel in June 1995 when Colombian National Police raided his Cali home. Rodríguez Orejuela was hiding in a secret compartment behind a television. His arrest marked the beginning of the end for the cartel's dominance. He was sentenced to 15 years in Colombia, but true to form, he maneuvered his way out after just 7, thanks to a controversial judge's order citing good behavior. Authorities immediately launched an obstruction investigation, while Rodríguez Orejuela enjoyed temporary freedom. His luck ran out in 2003. Colombian police rearrested him on new charges, this time for continuing to run cartel operations from prison. It turned out his chess game wasn't restricted by cell bars. He'd simply changed the board. Then came the real checkmate. In December 2004, Colombia, having lifted its ban on extradition, sent Rodríguez Orejuela to the United States. There, prosecutors had built an airtight case. The evidence was staggering. More than 200,000 kilograms of cocaine trafficked into America, hundreds of millions laundered through a pharmacy empire, and a trail of corruption leading to the highest levels of Colombian politics. Faced with overwhelming proof, Rodríguez Orejuela pleaded guilty in Miami federal court. The deal was harsh, but strategic. He admitted to conspiracy to import at least 5 kilograms of cocaine, agreeing to forfeit $2.1 billion in assets. In return, more than 24 family members were removed from the U.S. Treasury's list of designated narcotics traffickers, spared from prosecution for money laundering or obstruction, and allowed to keep legitimate businesses running. But the price was steep. Rodríguez Orejuela received a 30-year sentence. The court made it clear this was no ordinary criminal.
The court is totally unwilling to undermine and undo such public respect for the law, as well as the gravity of the offenses committed,
wrote Federal District Judge Federico Moreno.
Cali cartel co-founder Gilberto Rodríguez Orejuela is asking a Miami federal judge to allow him to return to his native Colombia and his family. The 81-year-old says he's suffering from prostate and colon cancer.
Even when Rodríguez Orejuela, now in his 80s and suffering from multiple cancers, appealed for compassionate release in 2020, the judge refused, stating that his criminal record was so repugnant there was no way to justify early freedom. His prison term was supposed to end in July 2029, when he would have been 90, but time ran out on May 31st, 2022. Rodríguez Orejuela died in a North Carolina prison medical center, claimed by lymphoma. His strategic mind, which once corrupted governments and controlled global drug flows, was finally silenced. The legacy Rodríguez Orejuela left behind was complicated. His cartel's quiet corruption approach bought off politicians, including delivering shoeboxes of cash to Liberal Party President Ernesto Samper's 1994 campaign, and controlled much of Colombia's Congress. While public perception painted the Cali cartel as less violent than Escobar's Medellin organization, later investigations revealed they simply paid journalists to suppress news of their killings. But in the end, even the greatest chess master couldn't outmaneuver justice forever. Rodríguez Orejuela's story serves as a lesson in the limits of power and the reach of the law. No matter how skillful the strategy, some games can't be won. His final move came not on a board, but behind prison walls, where his empire crumbled piece by piece. The king had fallen, checkmate at last.